Welcome back to a normal episode of Built in the Bush. Today I'm very excited to bring you the interview with our guest, Dr. Allan Parker OAM. He describes himself as a micro-behavioural scientist. He's a leading facilitator with the UN, OECD, has done some huge things with corporates, governments, United Nations, etc., on a really large scale, and is just one of the most incredible, interesting human beings that I've come across. And if you get the opportunity to do any of his courses, please do. I've been lucky enough to do one. I'm booked in to do another one next month, and booked in to do another one after that. If you just take one or two things from today's podcast, your life will be better and you will be happier. There's lots of things you could take from it, but if you just take one or two, it's been worth listening to. I really hope you enjoy this. And so, welcome to Built in the Bush, Dr. Allan Parker.
Tanya, it's a pleasure to be on board with you. And I'm looking at the blue sky you've got out there and I'm envious.
Yes, we were just talking earlier. Your weather is very different to the beautiful weather we're having in Charleville, southwest Queensland at the moment.
Yeah, I'm pleased that you're having the dry weather right now.
Yes, we certainly don't want the wet weather at the moment.
You've had more than your share.
Absolutely. So, Allan, we'll kick right off with it. So, Allan epitomises, I guess, what Built in the Bush is about, that it's our challenges. We can be successful not in spite of our challenges, but actually because of the challenges that we experience as we grow up. So, to get started, Allan, we'll go through our first one. So, built in, where were you born?
I was born in Maxville on the north coast of New South Wales between Nambucca Heads and Kempsey.
Yep. And then fine-tuned, where was most of your childhood spent?
I was a problem child. I had an eye problem and I managed as a 2 or 3 year old to get hit by a car. And so after a little bit of frustration, my parents decided that we were better off packing up and going to the city because they had to be tracking me backward and forward to the doctors. So they bundled up all 6 kids at that stage and headed off to Sydney. So I spent most of my childhood in the western suburbs in Sydney.
And then debuted in, where do you sort of consider your first adult job or...
It was pretty clear. I was the appointed assistant golf pro at Oatlands Golf Club in Sydney. My first job, I was an assistant golf pro.
Yeah, right. Part of your story is...
I look back now and think, was that true? Did I do that?
Did I really do that? You must think that about a lot of your different career paths because you've had such a diverse and interesting...
I look back at golf and go, did I really do that? And I also look back, because going back 43 years, clinical therapist, working one-on-one with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I went off and I did another course of study, realised that I didn't want to be a therapist. I didn't want to be a psychologist. And I wrote a book that was very successful called Switch On Your Brain. And because of Switch On Your Brain, we had such a huge response to it that I stopped doing clinical work and started teaching people, parents particularly, teaching parents how to work with their kids to do better and easier learning.
So initially you started with parents teaching them.
I originally worked with, when I was a practitioner and a therapist, the parents would bring their kids.
Okay.
But once I had so many people, because I did 100 radio interviews and 10 television interviews in a year, I got inundated. So I used to run courses and a parent couldn't come without a child and a child couldn't come without a parent. And I'd get 100 of them in the room and teach them techniques about how they could integrate and get their brain to work better.
Yes.
And which would mean better concentration, better memory, better reading. And I fell out of that into the business world.
Yes. So what were the steps that happened from that to get you to the business world?
Switch On Your Brain, the book, just turned me upside down. I was this successful therapist working in my 2 clinical practices and running a nice, simple business by the hourly appointments, one-on-one.
Yep.
And
And what
then,
year is this, Alan? How long ago are we talking?
look, you're not allowed to ask that.
Sorry, let's remove that question.
I wrote Switch on Your Brain 19 years before neuroscientists proved that neuroplasticity was real.
Wow.
So there's a puzzle to work out, but it's a long time ago. And that book was so popular, and I ran all these courses for parents with their kids. And it wasn't long before an executive from IBM contacted me. And he said, look, my wife and I were at the course with the 2 kids, and they had a great time and they're doing really well. He said, this Switch on Your Brain stuff, I've got to get you to come and work with my executives. And that was the birth of a corporate career, and it took me another 30 years to get out.
And get out you did. So you then went on to do some very interesting things from the corporate and the business side of things, I believe.
Yeah.
The
I did a really large amount of work in the corporate world, both training people, but it wasn't very long before I started facilitating meetings and business meetings, big, important strategic meetings. And I did that for 20 years nonstop, just training business people and really managing groups and helping them find agreement. And it was probably in the early 90s that I discovered I was actually good at managing groups.
Yeah.
And I realized that was my thing.
Do you remember how you discovered that?
And I've had a career of managing complex groups of all different, I've run, I think some of your listeners will know, I've run meetings for the United Nations. I've run meetings at the European Union, at the OECD in Paris, and I've worked in prisons.
Yes.
Training, prison officers how to manage really difficult inmates. And I've worked in schools, and it's, my expertise is really not managing a particular group, but understanding how human beings behave when they're in groups.
Yes, and that's an interesting concept.
We do get a little bit wobbly in groups.
We certainly do. And can you pinpoint, or do you know how it was that you think you came for that to be your strength, or your red thread, as we call it, that ability to manage different?
No, I just very early, because I didn't have a clue what to do when Switch on Your Brain was such a big hit. And when I came up with the idea of running courses, I was a bit daunted by that. I jumped in really quickly, and I did a course in adult education at University of Technology, and that saved me, I think. But it made me realise that teaching and managing groups of people was fun. And I just felt like I'd found my place, I think. Yeah.
Once you started doing that, you felt like you were at home, or it was your niche.
I was at home. Do you know Jim Lindsay? He's one of the real experts in low stress stock handling.
Oh, yes, yep.
Jim and I often talk about handling stock and handling people, and we sort of draw the conclusion that he's the low stress stock handler and I'm the low stress human handler, and they're pretty similar, except that I have the advantage or the complication that people speak, whereas stock, you don't need the word level communication, but the interaction is the same. And the only difference is stock understand how to be a good participant in a herd. Beings all want to lead it.
Is that one of the challenges in groups of human beings?
I think the competitive nature of human beings and desire to compete often means that instead of herding and working together and cooperating, we do tend to silo and try and we're a little bit oppositional at times. And I think it's sometimes we need at times to compete, but we've got to be careful when and with whom we compete, particularly when we're talking family businesses. We've got to realize that family business, particularly because of our closeness, relies on us being cooperative, relies on us doing things that that we do together, that rely on us, moving at a similar pace, that rely on us working out a plan of what we could do ahead of time. Because I think we don't put enough time into planning and preparation often.
Mm.
And then each person has in their head their plan, but we often brought those plans together so that we understand what it is. And it could be as simple as 2 weeks ago, we were planning Mother's Day lunch, and there were 10 of us needing to be there for Mother's Day lunch, and 4 of us had our own plan. And if we don't coordinate those, if we don't share and communicate, we can often be working at odds.
Yes.
Not with a poor intention.
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about with clients is that the energy or the intention that you go into an interaction or a meeting with. Is it collaborative, competitive, etc.? So it's exactly what you're talking about there. Do you have any tips or pointers that you give to families to try and help them to be working collaboratively rather than competitively?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. There's a lot. One of my favourite, have I got a chart up? Yes, I have. I'm going to draw it, flick that chart over, and I'm going to draw it. One of my favourite charts to draw when I'm talking with family businesses particularly, as I say, you've got to recognise that you've got 2 bits you've got to work successfully with. This is the business of family. And on Mother's Day, we've got to make sure it's the business of family that we're doing and not come in and bring the family business. That we've got to know when am I dad?
Yes.
And when am I the boss?
Mm-hmm.
When am I son and when am I the master? When am I the father and how do I behave when I'm the father? And when am I the boss handling some people, contractor, doing some fencing? And when do I let people know which hat I've got on?
Yes.
Yeah? Because I'm in a discussion, particularly if we're eating at the same table together at night and we've all come in from working and we've brought our working thinking in.
To the family dinner table.
To the family dinner table.
And how often would you see that?
And I say to people, the family dinner party can't be the family boardroom table. Have the dinner, clear it off, and then have the boardroom discussion.
And even change the tablecloth, I believe.
Say that again?
Even change the tablecloth as well, I believe, listening to one of your previous podcasts.
Absolutely.
And how does that help improve things by literally change?
It's a bit like when you're an English speaker and you've gone off and you've learnt French or German and you now speak fluent French. There's a whole new part of your brain that builds itself up for you to speak French. And where that language is, the memory system is completely different to where you've got English stored. And we can sort out where we keep things in the brain. Now, if I don't sort the 2 of them, I'm more likely to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about work because I've brought the work into the bedroom. So I say to people, whatever you do, don't take your phone into the bedroom.
Yes, we all do, me included.
Don't text in your bedroom because your brain's storing it in the same part of your brain as you've got sleep.
Yeah. So this would actually apply then for anyone that's bringing work home potentially and waking up in the middle of the night.
Absolutely. Particularly, Tanya, we now have half the population who work from home.
Yeah.
Now, in my situation here, this is the 3rd bedroom in my apartment.
Yes. I love the way could you explain this to the listeners?
It's completely set up as a recording studio. And I just finished teaching a course an hour ago. And when I teach the course, I get up and I put things on charts. Now, when we're doing that, we actually have the camera set up wide so that you can see both charts at the same time. But when I close that door, outside that door is home. Inside this door is work. And so when I'm doing something like this, I have the door closed.
Yes.
So that nobody outside can hear me. I have my notes and my pens here, and I write the points that you've given me down here.
Okay. Yeah.
That book never goes out into the apartment. It only stays in the office.
So there's that real distinction between the workspace and the home space.
Now, when I'm finished with you, I'll photograph any charts that I use. So I've got the record of them, and I won't tear it up. I'll take it off the wall, fold it up, and stick it in the paper recycling out near the front door.
Yep. So it's clean and ready to start again.
It's finished, and then my brain's free to go to the next thing.
Gee, I think
Now,
we could all.
So you're aware, the next project is already there, organised in front of me.
That you go to after this.
So everything's spatially located. And that way, my brain learns to separate work and home.
Huh?
And I think that's the biggest message that I'd have for people who work from home. Yeah.
To be really disciplined about those distinct areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess particularly if people are struggling and waking up in the middle of the night and are stressed, then if you are not doing this, then this might be the first step to reclaiming your sleep.
Now, in the book I wrote just in the last 6 months, Would, Could, Might, one of the chapters is about how to get good sleep. And one of the pieces of that is to make sure that you've got a piece of paper and a pen beside your bed. And if you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain's thinking about something, you get out of bed, you pick up the piece of paper and the pen, you walk out of the bedroom.
Of course, yeah. So I knew that you normally just write it in bed, but no, you walk out of the bedroom, so you're separating it.
You walk out of the bedroom, write it, and leave it on the bench outside.
Yep.
So that your brain knows that it's there and you don't have to go back and think about it.
And you're creating those boundaries, those distinct boundaries, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of
Now,
sense.
I want to give you two other ones.
Hmm.
One of them is a wonderful client of mine, and they live in the central North Queensland area. Central, I call it West, but they call it Central. And they have two lovely things that I like. The working people, when they're working, they can use expletives, bad language, outside the house fence, but they can't use it inside the house fence. And the minute anybody walks onto the veranda about to go into the house, the shoes and boots must come off.
Yep. So it's distinctly the home space rather than the workspace.
Yes. In animal term, we're marking out our territory. Now, if I wake up, grab the piece of paper, go outside, leave that pen there, leave the paper outside. When I wake up in the morning, I'll go, I wrote something down. Now, you might not even remember it in the morning because you've written it down. I won't go scientifically technical, but there's a piece of your brain called the hippocampus, and it decides what you remember and what you forget. And when you're in mental overload, it needs to be reprogrammed so that you realize that you can't keep remembering 500 things. That's why writing lists are important. If I get it out of my head onto a piece of paper, I've got more space inside my head and think more clearly.
And there's also something to the different processing we do. Is that right? We process it differently when we write something down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now you'll notice I use my coloured pens.
Yes.
Now I want you to remember that business and family business is different. So what do? I write them up.
Separate colours.
Yeah. Now I write it up just connecting the two. But the average person, I'm going to put that in yellow so you can hardly see it.
Yeah.
Just take it over and bring it up closely. The yellow, too many people have their family business and their business of family intertwined.
Yes.
So important.
In fact, would you say the ones that you see majority of them tend to be intertwined? Yes. Because I know certainly in my experience, the vast majority are intertwined.
Yeah. And it's why I say to people, if you've got a serious conversation to have, don't do it in the house.
Why is that?
Go for a walk so that you signal that your really serious conversations are not done in the house.
So again, keeping those separate distinctions.
Yeah.
Family.
Now, when you and I go for a walk, we're side by side. nearly as confronting as when you and I are across the table.
Yes, actually, now this is another thing I learned at your course that I did was, if you'd like to share with the listeners, is the science behind that. Because I mean, I know we all grew up where you have discussions, serious discussions across the table from each other, but that's not
Yeah.
actually.
Put the issue on the table, and I go, don't put the issue on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Put what we need on the table. Put the options on the table. Put the things we'd like to have happen on the
On the
table.
table.
And then work out how do we get them to happen.
Yes. And ideally, don't be sitting directly across from each other. Is that correct as well?
Too many people come in and go, Tanya, this is what the problem is.
Yeah.
And it's like I throw it at you.
Yes.
Now, when somebody does that to me, I go, tell me more about that. So I direct their eye away here so that it's not between them and me.
And that in itself creates a more effective communication or dialogue.
Much, and it reduces the tension.
Mm.
It's a really important bit.
Yes.
Now, as we reduce tension, we increase attention.
Mm-hmm.
I can be more. I've got better concentration when I don't get tense. Yeah.
And question: can you have good attention while the tension is raised? Can both be present ever?
You've got to work hard. You've got to work. The more intense we get, the more narrow my attention gets.
Yes.
Now, the more adrenaline and cortisol, the more, I get uppity, the more I get reactive, the less I'm going to have good brain function. And we now know that absolutely scientifically.
And when we don't have good brain function, that means we're not listening, we're not receiving.
Yeah.
So it would make it very hard to have effective communication in those circumstances, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, the other interesting bit about attention, Tanya, that I think is worthy of discussion is that I either have my attention inside Allan,
Mm-hmm.
I'm inside my head chatting,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm in my body feeling annoyed or irritated,
Yes.
and my focus is inside on me. Really good negotiation means when I can get this to be quiet and my attention goes out to the other person.
So when
Go ahead.
You're in the middle then of a particularly complex negotiation, you can feel that difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, as a serious long-term negotiator, when I'm interacting like this with you, there's never any internal mind chatter. I'm too busy listening to the questions that you're asking. I'm too busy listening for the angle that you want to take and move to next. I'm too interested to hear what you're saying so that I can work out what's the best way I can answer that so that it gives you what I want to hear.
So you're 3 steps ahead of us at all times, basically.
Yep. Now, jumping ahead of myself, you're halfway through a sentence and I've already worked out my response.
Isn't that a risk?
Yeah. I think it's a substantial risk. See, if I haven't listened carefully to what you've said, and I haven't acknowledged what you said, see, if I don't acknowledge what you say, or I don't answer the question you ask, you're not going to feel heard. So if I let you know what you've said, and then I answer the question you ask, because a lot of the time people will ask a question, but that just stimulates the place that this person wants to go in.
Yeah.
So I only hear half of your question. My brain goes off on a tangent somewhere. Now, the really important bit might have been the tail end of your sentence.
Which you just missed because your brain has gone off on a tangent.
What's more, I'm now arguing with you because I didn't hear the last bit. And I'll bet there's people sitting listening to this going, that was last night over dinner.
I'm sure there is. I know I'm even having a moment of, oh God, I did that yesterday.
Yeah.
So how do we get better at that?
How do we go quieter inside? Most importantly, use our eyes and watch the person's nonverbal. I always say to people, just notice if the person moves forward, moves backwards, or tilts to the side. Notice if they speed up. Because if they speed up, I don't want to speed up with them because we could then start chopping each other off.
Yes.
Yeah. But if I can keep my attention out on you, I'm going to be much calmer inside. And I'm going to be much quieter inside. And if I spent my time chatting inside my head going, I wonder what would be the next useful question for me to ask. Or before I jump in with an argument or an objection or an obstacle or an excuse. If I got into the habit of getting you to clarify, one of my favourite expressions is when somebody says something and I watch myself get a little bit annoyed or irritated. I go, oops, stop that irritation, Alan. Go back and ask them to repeat it. So I'll often say, Tanya, can you say that again? Now, sometimes I'll say, Tanya, can you say that again? I need to hear that again. Because sometimes I need to hear it again.
And so the cue for you is if you feel some irritation when you hear something, that's when you'll...
Now, another way I like to say that is Alan's annoyance, impatience, irritation is a signal for Alan to be more attentive to the other person. So it's my nervous system just saying something's not working.
And that means I need to pay more attention to the other person that I'm interacting
Yep.
with.
Now, here's a tough one for you listeners. The next time I'm annoyed or irritated, just ask yourself, did I express my needs so this person could know what I wanted? Or did I assume that they'd guess what I needed? And I don't like the way they said that. I go, did you let them know that you were particular about it? See, we live in a world that gets so bloody offended so often.
Psychic thinking, I call it. We have all these assumptions that are unchecked and unfounded.
Out of control. See, if there's something that I don't like about what you're doing, I've got to first say, did I talk to you about what my expectation was? Because 9 times out of 10 we haven't.
And did I talk to you in a way that you would clearly understand what that expectation was too?
Even
Yes.
more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
we get better at that?
Oh, we've got some work to do. I want to point out another chart that I've got in my wall. Can you see that one?
Breathe.
We've got to stop being reactive.
Okay.
And we've got to get out of autopilot. Let me say it again because it's worth saying again. Pause, breathe, observe, consider. If we could learn to inject that little sequence of 4 into our interactions, we could live reaction free. Imagine that.
Would be a totally different world. So pause. What were they again? The 4 steps?
Pause, breathe, observe, look, pay attention out. Because the magical thing is, when we use our eyes, and I put my attention out here on you, the visual part of my brain works. It's at the back of the brain. And the visual part of my brain works. It actually doesn't have many emotional neurons in it. So the more I use my eyes, the calmer my nervous system is.
That makes a lot of sense. There you go. Now, even if we can get a handful of people to try that, Alan, we're doing well. I like the consider part as well, because I think we're very quick to judge sometimes rather than just observe and consider.
I do not know any person whose life wouldn't be easier, more productive, and more enjoyable if we did that. Just 4 very simple things. Tiny. You know, to go making big. See, that's why I'm a micro-behavioural scientist. I love the little things that we can do. It has a significant impact.
Well, it's the little changes that create the big change, isn't it? Change doesn't come from, it comes from the little things that we do consistently, is it?
So much easier if it's small things consistently.
Yeah.
See, you imagine the next time you're in a meeting with 6 or 8 people, imagine if we could get through a half-hour meeting without anybody interrupting somebody mid-sentence. And could we, with or without a facilitator or a chair, could we make sure that there weren't 2 conversations going on at the table at the same time?
Yes, that as well. It's a common downfall in meetings.
Yeah. See, they're little tiny things, but boy, will they have a big impact.
Huge impact. And even those 4 steps too, as soon as one person is able to slow down and respond rather than react, it has a flow-on effect to the people around.
Absolutely. It's a multiplication process. Yeah. Because if there's 6 of us and we're all doing that, it'll happen a certain number of times. One of us pulls out and stops, it'll happen 1/6 as often.
Yeah.
2 of us, it'll happen less often.
Yeah, it makes sense,
And
doesn't it?
people say to me, yeah, but why should I? Because they are. And I go, the minute one person changes, the group dynamics change.
Yes.
And we only need to grow the good behaviours, not argue and defend and make excuses for the bad ones.
Well, it's the good behaviours where we have effective communication, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Alan, one of the other things that we do in Built the Bush, the very common that you normally say, what would you tell your younger self, etc. But we like to flip it here because quite often as we get older and we reach different successes, we actually don't stop to think about what we've achieved. If your younger self could see you today, and you can choose what age, 16, 20, 30, whatever age you'd like to choose, what would they be most proud of?
Oh my goodness, what a question. A lot of people know this about me, but I was born with an eye condition that meant I didn't read until I was 30.
Wow.
So asking the 16-year-old to say, what are you proud of? I think it would be that you never gave up believing that it could be different and that you just constantly held true that if you kept growing and learning, things would get better.
And you remember thinking that at 16 or believing that at 16?
Gosh, no. I couldn't read, and I did reasonably well at school, but I couldn't read.
That's incredible.
So I just thought I was slow.
Mm,
I certainly didn't think I was very smart,
yeah.
but I've always wanted to understand things. I've always been curious,
Mm,
and I think my curiosity, I think the 16-year-old would say, "I'm amazed how your curiosity turned into bravery and courage." I think that's what the 16-year-old would say.
your curiosity turned into bravery and courage. Gee, that's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
impressive feedback from your 16-year-old
Yeah.
self.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah,
you
I think,
that'd be most yeah. What do
gosh, as a 16-year-old looking up at Alan today, I'd go, I actually find it difficult to believe that this is true.
mm,
Yeah,
as in all the
because
things you've got to experience and accomplish?
you've done things, but mostly you've been open and receptive to the possibilities of things
Mm.
that had actually increased your chance of them happening. Yeah.
What would they be most embarrassed about? There's always something our younger self would be.
16-year-old would be most embarrassed about me. Gosh, it's something small and almost silly.
Put you on the spot. We can come back to.
No, it's something about it's almost the reverse. It's the 16-year-old saying your curiosity and your courage almost eliminated your need for embarrassment. And therefore, and I've got it. And
Yeah.
the 16-year-old's going, you turned out to be such a nerd. He's such a nerd. And I don't know if the word's used these days, but there were times when I was in high school and, I was a mediocre student, but boy, I worked hard. And some of my mates used to call me the conchy nerd. I was so conscientious. And the 16-year-old would look and go, oh, what a nerd. Get off it. Yeah.
And now are you very proud to be a nerd though, if that's how your 16-year-old self would
Look,
define you?
I always wanted to be really cool, and I guess a lot of people do. But particularly over the last decade, I've really got to like my nerd. Yeah, I like the fact that I'm nerdy.
Hmm.
And not being able to read for the first 30 years of my life, I love being a bookworm.
Yes.
I love to curl up in a corner and read for an hour or two.
Mm.
Wow, in fact, that's one of the things the 16-year-old would be proud of. To go, wow, I can't believe it. How nervous and frightened we were, him and me, having to read in front of a classroom, and how you just stumbled and trembled. And for you to have got past that, I never thought we'd get past it.
Yeah.
I think that would be. But the importance of I didn't think we'd get past it is important. What great questions. They really force you to think. Lovely different perspective. I think from a 16-year-old's perspective, given that my mother affectionately nicknamed me the professor at a very small age,
Mm.
I think the 16-year-old would go, I'm amazed
Mm.
We ended up being a professor after Joyce calling us professor. Yeah. And I think it would be, it's more unbelievable that could happen.
That's actually where life unfolded for you. So I take it when you were called professor at a young age, that was said in jest.
Yeah, it was sort of an affectionate term. I think it was to do with the fact I was so inquisitive and I wanted to, I had to ask questions about everything. Yeah, I had to understand all the time. So I was certainly the one who always questioned things, not rebelliously, but inquisitively.
Just inquisitive, that desire and need to understand.
Yeah.
Which I would think still fuels you today in what you do, I would imagine.
Yeah. And it fuels me, and I think, as a negotiator, my constant inquisitive urge gets me and the people I work with to explore possibilities beyond what we would have in our rushed and busy lives. Yeah.
Because you're not fixed or attached to certain outcomes or options as such, that innate curiosity.
Yeah. I think that constant curiosity means that things are always unfolding, and yet most of the world thinks it's finite and we've got to finish and complete.
Yeah.
And I think we complete stages of things, but I don't think we ever complete. Every negotiation's the next step in the beginning of the next one.
Yes.
Yeah?
Every ending is a new beginning.
Every ending's a new beginning. Yeah.
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 Very true.
Yeah. I worked with a group yesterday and we came up with some really, really beautiful action plan.
Yeah.
About a really big and important project. And one of them at the end of the day said, "Oh gosh, I'm so pleased we've finished that." And I said, "Oh, you haven't finished. You've just finished this meeting.
Yes, we're only getting started.
Tomorrow there's a whole lot of stuff that's got to be done." And I think there's a lesson in that in negotiation, because most people think negotiation is successful when you've had an agreement in a room.
Yeah.
But it's never the important bit. Getting human beings to keep their word, getting people to remember what we actually said in the meeting.
Yes, that's a big challenge in itself.
Yeah, and particularly, I often say to people, how do you go into meetings, walk out going what you're going to do when you didn't write anything down? And I'm amazed how few. See, I never go anywhere without a notebook.
Yeah.
I'm always writing, but I think having a good memory is one of the most important parts of being a good negotiator.
Be able to remember
And
different needs and preferences. And
good memory's not a gift, and it's certainly not a fixed thing that you can assess, because it's really about how I install what comes in that increases my memory. Even if I write with 4 coloured pens.
Yes.
Even if I write my notes.
Why?
Even as I write my notes in different colours, that's activating different pieces of the brain, and it means that the information then goes into more locations around the brain. And the more locations it goes in, the more likely it is to come back when we want to retrieve it.
Yeah, right.
Now, just sitting in a meeting and listening without writing, or without clarifying or questioning, or being curious, or restating it another way to check that we've understood. All of those things increase memory through a process called consolidation. But it simply means a piece of the brain called the thalamus pops all the different pieces of information in different memory channels or different memory circuits.
Hence why at your courses we always have lots of different coloured pens and...
Coloured pens and notebooks.
Yes.
And no lines in the notebooks.
Yes, that's true as well.
So I can just draw notes and write circles and lines and mind maps. And the more I vary it, the more likely I am to remember it. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm very much looking forward to attending Dr. Stephanie Burns' course next month in Sydney.
Yes. Yeah. And what is it, the 12th and 13th of
June.
Learning to Learn. And in fact, I had a conversation with her on Friday, and what she went on to talk about was just beautifully stimulating about how you can change the way the brain works and how you learn differently and how you can get improvement straight away.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing. I'll send you. In fact, it's going out on social media today.
Oh, okay. Lovely. I'll have to have a look.
Yeah, it's a goodie. That's 2 days that will change your world.
I have no doubt. Once you told me your story and being able to read at the age of 30, and I was hooked, Alan, and then everything I've read about her.
Who is the person that took me being from a stumbling reader to a constant prolific reader?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so unbelievably simply. That's the bit you can't explain to anybody.
Is how simple it actually is.
It's so simple.
I can't wait. Well, might have to have another episode after it.
I think an episode after Dr. Burns.
Yes. Before we finish up, we over the grid. So a few potentially bumpy questions. Actually,
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to get your answers to some of these, given the perspective and the way you look at the world. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I constantly develop neural patterns that I've practiced over years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Have you ever suffered from burnout? Do you believe in burnout?
Not unless I told myself I was. Yeah. I am I lead by most people's standards, I lead a ridiculously healthy life. Yeah. I don't eat any refined food.
None at all.
If it's in a packet, I don't eat it. Yeah. I make sure I have nuts and seeds and antioxidants before I walk out of the house every day.
Mm.
The seeds give me glutamate, which gives me clear thinking. The nuts give me a heap of protein, and it's the protein that turns into the neurotransmitters in my brain. The walnuts are filled with magnesium, and that has something like 26 positive impacts on the brain. I have almonds, which produces calcium that just does all sorts of good things and increases the likelihood of it getting into my bones and keeping my bones strong.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Your
three
green tea?
3 cups of green tea by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm right on schedule.
Yes. And now, what's the science behind this again, Alan, for our listeners?
Antioxidants, which we get out of green tea, almost any fruit, but berries particularly, hibiscus tea, green tea, ginger and lemongrass tea, they're very high in antioxidants. All the berries, plums are high. Virtually any of the citrus fruits are high. And the more we can vary our intake of antioxidants, particularly by colour, the more variety of the antioxidants, and they clean out free radicals out of our nervous system and out of our brain.
And free radicals lead to dementia and
Free radicals are the byproducts of the energy burning in our body, essentially. If you burn something, it produces ashes or carbon or smoke. Free radicals are the equivalent inside the brain and in the human body. They are the most toxic substance our body produces. And if we don't keep them moving with enough antioxidants, what's the word? Not weave. They tangle to start with, and then they form plaque.
okay.
And then they form a form of plaque called amyloid plaque, and so amyloid beta plaque, and they are common and considered I think I'm correct in saying 50% of all dementia people, when autopsies occur, have amyloid plaque in excess in their brain.
Yeah, okay.
There's not conclusive evidence that it's a precursor to, but it's certainly a contributor to. And I just go, I want my free radicals out. I want a clean brain. So I make sure I get the antioxidants in, I get the nuts and seeds. Because if we've got nuts and seeds in, they're so rich in all the different vitamins, minerals, amino acids, the good omega-3 fatty acids that the brain's getting.
That our brain needs.
The brain's getting amazing. It's like my brain has essentially had a massive dose of vitamins and minerals and amino acids right at the beginning of the day, and I don't take the pills.
You don't need to. It's getting all the vitamins and minerals that it needs.
And I've exercised. I've been an exerciser all my life.
Mm.
I did 3 5K runs last weekend. Now, the 3 5K runs produces serotonin. Now, if I've had my antioxidants and I go running, it produces BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor is called the brain fertilizer.
Yeah.
It's the chemical in the brain that actually causes stem cells in the brain to produce new brain cells. Isn't that, it is wow.
Yeah.
It is wow. BDNF is the most, there's more scientific articles on BDNF in the last 5 to 10 years than almost anything else in brain science. And it's because all I need to do is go for a walk or a run for 20 or 30 minutes, have some green tea, have some berries, keep my antioxidants up. And the exercise and the antioxidants produce brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
I had never heard that before.
It is amazing. It's one of the biggest breakthroughs in brain science ever.
I can't believe that's not more widely.
Well, I tell everybody.
Yeah. I will be telling everyone now.
I can't believe that was discovered and it didn't become known to everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting bit. The stem cells that produce new brain cells, so the brain can heal.
Yeah.
And their predominant place, the first place they were located, was in a piece of the brain called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the piece of your brain that decides what you remember long-term, short-term, and what you have complete amnesia to. So if we want to have a good memory, we've got to look after hippocampus. Yeah. Here's the sad news. Every time you and I get stressed, anxious, or have a little hissy fit, it produces cortisol, and cortisol kills hippocampal cells. Yeah. Kills hippocampal cells. I go, wow. When people, I've got people around me and they're getting stressed, I go, don't. Because every time we have a hissy fit, we're damaging brain cells. Yeah. But this research shows that with the antioxidants and the exercise, we can actually, wow. Yep. That is amazing. We can grow and repair brain cells. I'm going to let everyone know that now. Thank you, Allan. I think it's one of the most important things in science, I know. Yeah. Extraordinary. Definitely. And particularly that, people are running around going, oh, I'm stressed. And I go, stop, slow down. Yeah. Stop, breathe. Yes. Yeah. Actually, yes. Did you see see my background today? I have a different one up each time after our conversation the other day. All right. Yes. I think you may have just answered my next question. Do you have a self-care routine? I never know. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, when I left school, became a professional golfer, I then went back, not to school, but to college, and studied naturopathy, and I became a naturopath. And that was one of those really big turning points. Naturopathy got me clear that health wasn't a coincidence. Yes. That if we took care of ourselves, if we looked after ourselves, if we slept well, if we exercised well, if we eat well, if we surround ourselves with good friends who support us and love us and care about us, not people who do drama and complication and nonsense, noise. Yeah. Naturopathy really consolidated in me that this organism that I live in can live a long life healthily or a long life ordinarily. And e.g., I scientifically know that trans fats kill mitochondria in the cell. And the mitochondria in a cell is where energy comes from. So it's the engine room. And when we have, and I've got somebody close by who loves their Tim Tams, but every time we have a Tim Tam, it's just filled, they last for months because they've got trans fats in them. Those trans fats kill and that's why a lot of people are walking around going, oh, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I'm burnt out. And I go, reduce your trans fats and I'll guarantee you energy level will lift. I have to try that one too. Reduce the amount of sucrose that you have. That's why I say have the sunflower seeds, because it balances your blood sugar level and your moods will be calmer. Yes, absolutely. What does the bush need more of? Gosh, I think it's the wrong question. I think the question needs, what do Australians need right now? And I think the answer is the calmness of the bush. Yes. Yeah. Lovely question and answer. I walk around the world watching people and I go, wow, they're all hardwired and boy, are they wired. And I go, just calm down, settle a bit. And it's, part of why I'm doing the brain reset tour around Australia to all the regional country areas. It's good healing for me. It's contributing to the rural communities, but it's great to be out of the city and experience the country in all its different varieties. My goodness, driving around from country town to country town, you realise how vast and how different the place is. So I think the question is, what do the people need? What I'd love to see happen in rural Australia is everybody who doesn't live in rural Australia realising that we couldn't exist.
Amen.
We
Absolutely.
starve to death.
Couldn't agree more.
And they're a community of people who look after the environment at a level we city folk have not got a clue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a clue. Looking after the environment, living in the city is only a concept. They're so in touch with it. They're deeply under pressure.
Yes.
The social demands on them are greater and greater. But I'm confident that there's a turning in the thinking of the regional rural world that I see.
Yes, that's promising.
There's a willingness to explore and learn that I see much more tangibly in the regional areas than I do in the country.
It's interesting. And is that a trend you've only noticed recently, or that's something consistent over?
I think I first started seeing it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I've watched it increase. I think there's two elements to this. The learning curve of the rural Australia is doing that. And I think the learning curve of the city is doing that. It's just doing enough to maintain a plateau. The difference is I find that the people in rural, when they learn something, they apply it straight away.
Which means they remember it more so then too.
Yeah. And that's partly because they do things, they're active physically doing. The ratio of people who earn their living in the city by knowing but not doing.
That's a very poignant.
Somebody who trades on the stock market, which is a really interesting and busy phenomenon, but they don't do anything.
Yeah.
They watch and make a few calculations and shift funds from one place to another, but that's not a physical activity. But if I'm going out to repair a fence, that's a whole different brain function.
Yeah, it is.
So I think their wiring is, I'm going to apply what I learn because I apply and do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also too, there's that element, I suppose, in regional that if I don't apply it, there may not be anyone or any other person that can apply that service or that skill set. Yeah, that's very, very true, Alan. I'd never looked at it from that perspective. So whilst we're on that, do you want to let the listeners know about your regional Resetting Brain tour? Because there are a few Queensland locations coming up.
Yes, there are.
So those 2 sessions left in Queensland for the Regional Reset Your Brain Tour, Mara on the 29th of May and Roma on the 5th of June. So big thank you to Dr. Allan Parker for joining us, not just for 1 session, but 2 sessions to record the podcast over and to impart his wisdom upon us. I feel very privileged. Always learn something when you spend time with Dr. Parker. If you can get to any of those sessions, please do. Even if you take 1 or 2 things from them, it will make your life easier and happier. Hope you enjoyed the podcast today and look forward to tuning in with you next time.